Supergroup 1.
Martin.
Supergroup 1. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to try and put some energy into this and revitalise everyone, because we're a bit heavy from going through all of that research. We're proposing Portsmouth becomes a microstate, so independent from the UK. And we got to this position because we took the scenario of 50 to 100 years' time, Portsmouth is self-sufficient, self-reliant. So we thought, why not? Portsmouth becomes a microstate. Therefore, we can use our own budget for all of our own things. We can pass laws that increase the sort of output of Portsmouth. So still keeping with the trade and export, but becoming more of a power in Europe as opposed to just a city in the UK. So we also looked at.
There must be a Scottish person here.
So we compared a few different microstates at the moment. So we've got Singapore, Liechtenstein, Andorra, and Monaco. Singapore and Monaco, they're hugely dense places, so really important for Portsmouth to respond to how they look at food, power, everything about a hugely populated area. Liechtenstein and Andorra, they've got really close ties with their neighbouring states, so we've learned quite a lot from these guys. Just a quick map showing Portsmouth as the next microstate in Europe. A few of the other ones that we've also looked at, Malta, San Marino, could have also looked at those ones.
Malta.
It's the flag.
It does look like you're some Turkish army.
Yes, exactly. We get this every single time. This is actually the flag of Portsmouth.
It is, yeah.
It is.
I always think it looks like a castle.
We could redesign it, I suppose.
Yeah.
We could give that a go.
You should. Malta is how big? That's quite. What's that size? Malta.
Yeah, Malta's.
445.
Oh, it's twice the size.
Sorry. 316, sorry.
Kilometres. Oh, right, so it's a lot bigger.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
That's population, yeah.
So it's twice the population.
Yeah, twice.
Okay, so how do we get to independence? We've done a little timeline that tracks the sort of all these events that happen up until the independence. 2013, we had the job cuts for BAE Systems. That sort of begins this process of not having a great relationship with the government. 2014, construction begins on the Ben Emsley HQ. Now, the important part of this is it's privately invested, so the government haven't given any sort of incentive to build this place. It's private investors coming in and sort of revitalising some of these spaces. 2015, an article I saw the other day, the government have refused to allow a polar research vessel to be built in Portsmouth. So something that's quite out there, quite new and important, they're taking it to somewhere else like Birkenhead. And you sort of think, well, Portsmouth's, all the history in it, why not take Portsmouth? So a lot of people were a little bit unhappy about this. 2017, obviously we've got the referendum coming up about the EU. Portsmouth is mostly conservative. So what I've found is, well, what we all sort of know is Conservatives do want to stay in the EU. They want to have all the benefits from the EU. Now a lot of this is very, loose. So we sort of say, okay, so the rest of the UK wants to go out of the EU. Portsmouth guys aren't happy because we want to stay and have all of those benefits coming in. So we're sort of on the other side to the rest of the UK. So the government cuts, we've had loads already. Further government cuts sort of halts all of the strategic core, the core funding plan of Portsmouth. So not a lot can happen, not a lot can progress because of all these cuts. And this continues with the big employers in Portsmouth. You've got BAE Systems, Astrium, IBM. We're kind of saying, well, perhaps if there's all these cuts in Portsmouth and the rest of the UK, why do these companies want to stay here? So we're saying they threaten to leave, which sort of, the council in Portsmouth sort of think, well, perhaps we need to do something about this. So we then move on to 2030. So it's quite a big step, but this is when Portsmouth's 42 councillors decide that, okay, let's start becoming independent. This process is called devolution. So devolution is effectively passing over of laws, passing over of all the powers. So all the powers are granted to Portsmouth. They start being able to use their budget for what they want, and this stuff has happened in quite a few places that you wouldn't expect. So, you know, obviously it's happened to Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland before. It's proposed in Cornwall, Yorkshire, and the whole of north of England have also looked at doing this as well. The Isle of Wight, another important one that's mostly theoretical than actual solid evidence, which Cornwall is quite solid. So if we keep going, tourism is expanding, you know, because all Portsmouth's sort of investing in what they want to invest in. All the farming and shipyard industries sort of start revitalising, you know, we start building ships for ourselves, we do a lot of outside work as well, so a lot of European countries can come in and, you know, we can sort some of their navies out. 2050, again, passing its own laws, sorting its budget out, encouraging young professionals to work in the city. So we've got some stats later that show that it's an ageing population, and there is not any incentive for young people to come to Portsmouth. So, you know, all of these laws, all of these things are really for the young people that they're the future, we're the future. And then by 2070, referendum held for complete independence. So we are looking at a very long way off. The whole idea of this brief was to look at the future of Portsmouth. It's a long shot, but this is what we've gone with.
So we declared our independence. The first thing we do, we set our boundaries. What's ours, what's theirs, what do we want, what are we taking? The first way to start with this was to look at what our council boundary was. You see it's the black dotted line that currently surrounds us. And then following from that, we decided that based on our strategy it's going to follow, there were other parts just outside the council boundary that we kind of wanted to claim as Portsmouth, or take as Portsmouth. So we took the Langstone Harbour Islands, and we extended the boundary down by Gosport to cover all of that section down the bottom, but we'll come on to.
So yeah, then we started looking at some case studies. You know, we've got to find a reason to go for it. You know, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, so Portsmouth can learn from it. It's a quick history of Monaco. It became separate in 1419 from France, and it has its own monarchy. It became a full United Nations voting member in 1993. However, despite Monaco's independence, it uses the French defence, so that's something maybe we also could look at, although it does have a couple of military units. So the successes of Monaco, well, it's the world's lowest poverty rate, which is obviously a great thing for a place. And unemployment rate is only 2%. Advantages of being a microstate, they have their own rules and adaptations on the rules. They have no income tax. Now maybe that's a bit strong, but it just shows that they can make their own rules, you know, for positive reasons. They have a thriving tourist destination, and they share the name. I said that. The failures of it. In the year 2000, nearly 2/3 of the residents of Monaco were foreigners, so it could attract others that you lose your identity of who you are. And there's only one university located in Monaco, so maybe they've not looked at that aspect. Next one.
I'm not going to dwindle too much on this, but Andorra, main things to learn from this one is tourism is one of the key points of Andorra. It's one of the main imports of GDP, so it's 80% of the GDP, and 19% of that, of the rest of it, is financial and insurance sectors. So tourism is a huge factor in Andorra. It's their main source of work. Like I said before, they've still got links between Spain and France, so although we say we want Portsmouth to become independent, we can still get the benefits from the UK. You know, we're not completely cutting ourselves off, but you know, we just want to be able to pass laws ourselves and, you know, have that sort of sense of self-reliance. The important part about Andorra is that there's free healthcare for the people that work, so employers pay for your healthcare. So as opposed to having an NHS where everyone just pays taxes, if you're in work then you get that free healthcare. So it encourages people to work, and you know, it's all about encouraging people to actually take part in Portsmouth. Liechtenstein, a couple of important things from here. Again, tourism, financial service sectors are the most important parts. Like Adam said with Monaco, the standards of living are very high, the literacy rates are very high. Literacy rate in Liechtenstein is 100%. In Portsmouth, 25% of Portsmouth's population has poor numeracy and literacy skills, and 39% of them are not up to GCSE level. So that's quite a shocking stat, the fact that 25% of the people who live in Portsmouth just aren't educated in almost any way. Interesting fact with Liechtenstein, when they were sort of struggling with business, they lowered the company tax so that all the companies throughout Europe came towards Liechtenstein. And now that's resulted in a population of 37,000 people and a company rate of 73,000.
It's called a tax haven.
It is. But one of the things about Liechtenstein that doesn't work so well is that they import 85% of their energy.
Okay, so I looked at Singapore. Obviously the scale is quite significantly different, but looking at their history, so it was under British rule first, and then it was conquered by the Japanese, went back to British, and the British gave increasing levels of self-governance. And then they basically have the neighbouring Malaya, or they had the neighbouring Malaya, and they formed together to form Malaysia. But this didn't work and caused basically racial unrest, and they were voted out, and then Singapore became independent in 1965. So it's quite a modern day independence really, considering all the others. And basically I focused on looking at their strategy towards their self-sufficiency. So they focused on the economy, on providing new housing and getting an independent defence force. Basically they offered tax holidays to investors to increase income. They provided 25,000 new homes in the first 2 years, and in the first 10 years they basically rehoused everyone. And then they put in place the basically every 18-year-old male has to train for 2.5 years in the army. They also were quite fortunate to have a massive port, which they relied on quite heavily for import-export, and it really made their economy thrive.
But they've built that since the port was independent, most of that.
Yeah, most of it, yeah.
How many cruises have we got going next week? 1 million visitors cruise into Portsmouth annually. Singapore, I said Singapore. I was dreaming about this new independence. I'm voting for you guys already. Who's going to be president, by the way?
But it's the container business, the huge one. Absolutely massive. It's the biggest in Southeast Asia, I think.
Yeah, I think it's the second biggest in the world. So.
After
Hong Kong?
Right.
It got recently overtaken by Hong Kong, so it was previously Singapore.
Right.
So this was their housing strategy. So basically, the HDB is the Housing Development Board. They're responsible, they're a government scheme basically that is trying to rehouse everyone because it had quite a high population of squatters and low quality housing. So now 80% of the population are based in HDB houses. And the way they did it is basically split the country into towns. Each town was self-sustaining and comprised of these neighbourhoods with a centre of hospitals, schools, parks and everything that you'd need in that one place. And then each neighbourhood was divided into precincts, so it's quite similar to the American method of town planning.
Okay, so we've claimed ourselves as a state. The most important thing to then become subtractive from the UK and rely on ourselves is the self-sufficiency and all the different infrastructures that we need to look at as part of our strategy to actually become self-sustainable as a city-state on ourselves.
So this is basically the first initial concept sketch that we did, just showing the key areas that we think that could be useful. So over here there's already quite a lot of agricultural space, and we thought that we could build on the mud flats basically and take some of that. We know that it's a triple SI at the moment, but we'll move on to that, how we're going to resolve that issue. And then just looking at the sort of things that we might need to put into the city, not necessarily picking out their actual location, but just the elements that we might need to include.
Okay, so based on the concept proposal that George has explained, we looked at these the Langton Harbour mud flats. Basically, if we let the sea level rise, we're going to lose them anyway. So what you'll see in our flood strategy, when Adam talks about that, is that we're basically taking the assumption that if we're saving them for them, we can take a bit back off them anyway, because they either lose a lot or they lose that much to us. So we're claiming that to be based on the rest of our strategies, as well as then claiming the islands in Langton Harbour, building them up to use infrastructure spaces offshore from the actual island.
So this is going back to housing. There are 23 different areas in Portsmouth, which I thought was quite a lot to focus on. So instead I looked at the wards, of which are only 14 at the moment, but based on the Singapore strategy that say that only 9 neighbourhoods can make up one town, assuming that Portsmouth is the size of one town in Singapore, that these would need to be changed and basically progressed forward to the future. So if we go to the next one. So just looking quickly at the deprivation in each of the wards, Charles Dickens is the worst one at the moment for deprivation. We've basically got 60% poverty rate in Charles Dickens. Looking at Drayton and Farlington, that's quite significantly different up there. The actual life expectancy between those two wards is about 7 years for a man, and I think it's slightly less for a woman.
But caution is very high as well.
Yeah, Caution, Portsgrove, there.
Extraordinary percentage increase in the population in an extra period of time, 9.8.
Yeah,
Wow.
massive. Over 10 years, yeah.
Yeah, it's huge in the road, isn't it? Does it feel like that?
Don't know. Is it students? What's the population?
So this is basically considering how the wards can be changed and modernised. So where they were previously laid out looking at the historic farmland and the farming plots, I used modern infrastructure and urban grain to define the new boundaries of these wards and reduce the number to fit in with the strategy used in Singapore. So this is a section through Portsmouth Harbour where we're proposing a tidal lagoon. Basically, this barrier, which I think comes in a bit, is it? Yeah. This barrier basically breaks the space between Gosport and Portsmouth. And then just picking out a few different bits that could be developed in the scheme. Looking at this part here, which I think was part of the old fort, the moat of the old fort, sorry. And looking at this area and basically just making this lagoon space quite interactive.
Okay, so looking at some of our infrastructure topics, sewage of the city, we end up with 3 options to go with our strategy. The first option would be leaving where it is and have them, but disadvantages of that would be the whole point of keeping all our infrastructure within our own city boundaries and making it all part of our own self-sustaining state. By keeping it in Haven, we wouldn't really be achieving that. So end up leaving the other 2 options of either using our new islands that we've claimed in Langstone Harbour as our infrastructural offshore points, but we have to have separate ports and service facilities to get to them, or including it on a separate facility within our actual mainland on the reclaimed mudflats. But then that also has the disadvantages of being displeasing to the people living around it, but it would be a cheaper alternative without the need to actually have service going across the sea to get to it. Another fun topic, what do we do with the dead? Portsmouth has 3 main graveyards. They take up quite a lot of space, 376,000 square metres of space. The problem with them is they're pretty full. There's not a lot of space left to actually bury people there anyway. And there's the argument of what is more sustainable, burying people or cremating them. There are 2 main options. Currently 72% of the UK cremate after they die. When you compare it to countries like Japan, we do 98%. It kind of looks like it's the way the world's going at the moment. So there was a decision made that the Microstate of Portsmouth would become 100% cremation country, so you'd have to get cremated after death, and we would get rid of burial altogether.
3 gallons of embalming
One of the main reasons why we didn't like burial was the amount of toxic that goes into the air when the process actually happens. The 3 gallons of embalming fluid put in per person before they're buried, 480,000 gallons per year, which is all leaking into the soil in our graveyards. It makes the land very difficult to actually use to redevelop if we ever wanted to use it anything like agriculture, and limits what you can actually use it to in the future. So it's proposed that Portsmouth would get its own crematorium, and then I'll show you how possible ways to make that more sustainable could be, as it's not a very sustainable approach in itself at the moment. But the problems we have at the moment is that the nearest crematoriums are Portchester and Havant, and if you had your funeral down by Highland, that's almost a 10-mile journey to Havant and 8 miles to Portchester, and to be honest, at a funeral, that's not the first thing I really want to be doing, is travelling that far. Basing on a crematorium, at the moment it takes between 600 to 1100 degrees C, the process, when you're actually cremating a body. And it's, as kind of ghastly as it sounds, that's a lot of wasted energy that we're just throwing into the air.
You're going to recover the energy, aren't you?
There's processes in the country at the moment that have already been put forward. Some have been rejected because people are a little bit edgy on them. But using the heat as district heating strategies, there's one council that's going to use it to heat a public swimming pool, so they'll basically be swimming in the heat of dead people. And then there's the idea of turning, using the heat to make steam and then creating steam generation out of it to create power and regain some of the energy used in the process, as it is a massive amount of energy per body. The problems at the moment, though, are the 2 acts that are enforced in the UK, which, as a microstate, we wouldn't have to follow. The Environmental Protection Act 1990, in all when you look at it in detail, in brief, it increases the gas and fuel use by 400% of what you could actually burn a body at. And then the Code of Cremation Practice, which limits the amount that can be done in a day, and the fact that you have to burn a body on the day of the funeral makes sort of arranging it all quite difficult, and kind of limits to only 1 or 2 per furnace per day. So ends at home furnace tend to start up and stop, and then start up and stop again every morning, which actually uses around 5,000% of preheat compared to continuous heat to burn a body without actually lowering the temperature of reheating.
There's sort of 2 reasons for that. The first one is to do with the smoke.
Yeah.
So the reason you have a high temperature because then the smoke isn't noxious. And the second one is because people want the urn with the ashes of their person, not a mix of everybody.
Yeah, or looking at the process of cremation.
Sorry, I'm jumping in.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of cultural stuff in this.
It is.
And it's a very
You've got to be quite
interesting area to
open-minded.
look at. And when you do look at it, it's very odd.
The problem at the moment is that,
You know how the Cremation Society started in the UK?
yeah, you told us about that.
Yeah.
Burning people in their gardens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They embarrassed their neighbours, so they went to Parliament. God.
And so basing it on how many people actually die in Portsmouth a year, it's just over 2,000. It's 5.7 a day, which is 1 cremation every 4 hours. Based on the fact that it only takes 2 to 3 hours at the moment, you can actually do that all in a day, following the current procedures.
Again, you probably take too long, you guys. We're going to speed up a bit. The other guys got a chance.
Looking at just current services in the city, so schools, hospitals, prisons, police, and the fire and rescue, we just propose we'd use the same as we currently got. And the shocking one is looking at how much education facilities there are in the city compared to how low we said our educational actual stats were.
Agriculture, so this is how we're going to respond to the infrastructure at the moment. Reclaiming most of that eastern edge. We've always felt that the eastern side has always been very low density compared to the western side. So it's been very industrial, moving down into golf courses, beaches, the nice stuff. So proposing that is going to be some sort of agricultural field, probably greenhouses, things like that. Guerrilla gardening and government initiatives, we're going to try and encourage as much of that as possible, trying to make sure that people use every single space as possible to, as I said before with the current presentation, it's about changing people's minds as opposed to trying to get as much food as possible, trying to provide for the rest of the Portsmouth side. I've made a few calculations about that darker green area here. I do need to double check those calculations, but Portsmouth would need 1 million metres squared to at least subsidise the amount of food that we consume.
Got 4.5 minutes apparently.
And the dark green area is 1.75 million metres squared, so it's plenty of space to at least make a dent in it, increasing exports as well. Clean water, we're proposing reservoirs, so we've looked at a few other reservoirs and things, and the interesting thing to take from this is Portsmouth Water, by the year 2030, are hoping that each person will only consume 130 litres a day. So it sounds like a lot, but it includes all of your baths, your washing, your hosing your car down, all of those sort of things. And based on that, these reservoirs are plenty big enough, probably about 30 to 40 metres deep. So it's going to take a lot of excavation.
Yeah.
But I think those areas are going to be increased by tourism. You're going to be able to use these areas for more than just clean water.
So you're saying that 130 litres there is a lot less than we use at the moment, is that right?
Yeah, so at the moment it's 160, 170.
How are we reducing?
The aim is to change people's minds, to change the way people use water.
That's a terribly deep reservoir. 10-storey building, I say.
Keep going, we've got right out of time.
Just a few infographics showing some guerrilla gardening. The eastern side, it's all going to be grey water irrigated, so just the process in which all of that develops. Got a few sketches here that show some of the embankments and flood defence that Adam will go through a bit later. Trying to encourage floating architecture as well, floating agriculture, sorry. But also in getting that flood defence with agriculture as well, trying to merge it all together.
Okay, this is just conceptual, but as a group we decided to move the Navy and international transport to the southeast of Portsmouth. The main reasons for that was the accessibility of these big ships coming in. It's very tight where they're going at the minute, and obviously this being open sea, they'd be able to come in and out quite quickly. And also the excavation of the soil, because of the depth of them, wouldn't have to do that, so that'd be saving on costs. Next.
So I looked at the import and export, and basically for this agricultural land here, we're going to aim to feed the whole of Portsmouth, and then hopefully there will be extra, and whatever is extra will be exported. Imports will obviously be food that we can't grow, and the usual imports really. This is just an example off of Singapore, and they've got 60 islands off of Singapore, and every single one of them pretty much is used for trade or industrial purposes. And this is just looking at the sea salt pans in Lanzarote, more for the agricultural area, of how they basically harvest sea salt from the sea.
Okay, this is just quickly on transport. You'll see on the next slide we're putting the defence system along here, so we'd use that to transport cars over. So that would cut down carbon emissions from the route that the cars from Hayling would have to normally take, and likewise Gosport, shorter route. And it's estimated 10,000 cars a day travel from Gosport.
You still have?
Electrical ones.
I thought you'd be on
When they're cheaper.
You're not going to have petrol or diesel.
Yeah. So basically you're opening up a route. It's cars, it's trams, but for cars here. Next one. So this is our defence system. We've included Chichester because it's the same bit of water. If we block this off, we'd have to block that off. The reasons for our decision here is, like we saw previous, they've originally blocked that off, but they haven't allocated for other parts. So by doing this, it limits, it gets rid of all the chances of flooding in this area. And also you'll see here that we put a tidal lagoon as well for power.
So any more slides?
Yeah, quite a few.
Yeah, for the power.
Yeah, stop.
Yeah,
Flick through.
just go really
Just
quick.
give the pictures.
Okay, and they have locks, so boats can still go through next.
Otherwise it's not going to be.
Yeah, so that's about the active
No
routes
words.
stopping it. Yeah.
Yeah, seen that. Yep.
Tidal
No,
lagoon.
see,
That's about it.
Yep. Yep.
That's
see,
the overlay of Swansea, so
Yep.
it's a scale of ours. It's double our size one, yeah.
Yep. No,
Hybrid power.
And that's the equation you're talking about, bringing all the powers together. We worked out
Yeah.
how much more we'd have. Yeah, that's.
yeah.
This is our kind of overall proposal of all the different elements. So the tidal lagoon, the reclaimed land, the active routes, the port.
Yep.
Yeah, next one. And the, just quick slides
Yeah,
on
this is
individual.
just our individual proposals for,
Where you're
for the
going
next
for.
stage.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So, do you want
Alright.
to go through that?
Just a couple of words.
Okay.
Just say.
Yeah. So basically, this is
No
looking at
words. 35, 36. Right. 37.
Yeah.
Agriculture. Guildhall Square.
Go back to Guildhall Square. Which bit are you covering?
It's actually just.
Yeah, this is my individual one, so I'm trying to bring political and agricultural together, trying to propose that the City Council would move out of those offices there because they're a bit of an eyesore, trying to renovate that area because
Okay.
Yeah.
Just say the function of it.
National Assembly. Okay.
This is me. Lagoon.
Yeah.
Next one. Renovate this area, some sort of sports facility, water sports facility. Yeah. Is that it?
So, yeah.
And that's our locations.
Oh, those are your locations.
Yeah. Our sites.
And we've got a crematorium. So that's good.
Yeah, that's what you were doing.
Water
Yeah.
sports.
So the infrastructure we looked at, that's what we've developed.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Sorry about
Thank
that.
you very much. And
Wow.
it's a lovely fiction.
Okay.
And it's sort of full of holes because it's such a lovely fiction, and that's
Yeah.
sort of interesting. So we could pick holes in it anywhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter, because it's actually good fun, doing that. I think the problem with your case studies is they're nothing like Portsmouth. They are virgin land which was built on Singapore, or they are a beautiful place like Monaco, which is on the Meg, which is why it had rich people going there always, which made it what it is. You didn't
Or
mention
Andorra, which is sort of mountain
mountains,
communities.
skiing,
It's
tourism,
a
lovely.
couple of valleys which you drive
Yeah.
through.
You didn't mention Jersey, which you might have done because it's an island. It's got that another tax haven. So in a way, what is really different about Portsmouth is its poverty, its grain, its history, massive burden history, which makes it in a sense quite different. And I think that to me the weakest part of the scenario, in a sense, is thinking of the island state. Much more likely, probably, to be a regional state. You can imagine, the whole
Of England.
South Hampshire.
Separating off from the rest of the country.
How South Hampshire saying we're going to separate off the rest of because actually then you've got enough to make the whole thing work. It's a bigger sort of scale of things. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a great fiction and really interesting. And again, you shoot yourself in the foot because you immediately say, well, actually you've got to block Chichester Harbour as well. Because otherwise the water comes from and that's fairly obvious. But that's the point. Everything is actually joined
You
up.
have to cooperate.
And when you look at the infrastructure of the roads and things, well, unless you're going to close the boundaries, the borders, you still need the A27 level, the M27. And so it's interesting what the road throws up when you start doing this.
I wondered myself whether one of the great flaws with your microstate idea is to become a microstate in this context, you'd have to be extremely aggressive. And you guys have got to be sort of punchy. Your power from dead bodies is coming from your conquering army, surely. And this sort of thing. And you've got your barrages across these rivers. That's because you're already expanding across Langston Harbour into Gosport and places like that. You're an expansionist military, by the sound of it. So, I don't know. I think what you could do is, it's rather nice, the narrative string. It does sort of engage one in this fantastic story. The thing that I would ask is, consider how you extend that. I'm not so convinced, just drilling down to the detail, about the level of your ambition when you actually come down to some of the bits. Because when you think about the level of ambition for this microstate, to make it successful, you have to have a big ambition. Your port's tiny. It's in the wrong location. You're hemmed between the underground barrages, which you can see in that photo. Can you see the line of dots going along? And then you've got the sand spit coming out on the other side, so none of your big ships can get in there. So you've got to go right out. Big. You need Europort. Have you seen the size of Europort? Put the size of Europort down on.
Beyond Rotterdam,
Yeah.
Europort was massive.
Britain used to be the biggest port in Europe, or the Thames Estuary was the biggest port in Europe until they opened Rotterdam.
And all the shipping that comes up the channel now goes, most of it goes to Rotterdam.
So we can nab it on the way.
And exactly. And the point about Singapore was it isn't actually so much stuff coming there and staying in Singapore because it's tiny. So it's a distribution thing. The whole of it's the hub, the whole Southeast Asia. So
Yeah.
maybe this could become the hub.
For the whole of Europe, North Europe.
What I like about the port, I mean, I also think like the first group, I think we ought to be coming together somewhere. I think we're much more powerful.
Individual.
If your individual wants to come together in one location, I think if we're one bit, because then you can really look at the urban grain. And actually, this is a lovely fiction, but you never really get into that urban scale of really looking at it, and I think that would make it more powerful. But the port, what I like about the thing about Portsmouth is the original port was at Portsmouth for the Romans, because it was incredibly safe. I've come in a storm, in a yacht, coming in, and when you see the entrance to Portsmouth, you think, thank God, as soon as you're through that, you're safe, totally safe. You know, you're coming before safe, wind behind you, my God, this is getting a bit hairy. Get through that mouth, and you're totally safe. But you don't need that now for a port, because these ships are vast, they are massive. So the port can be right out in the Solent. And much more aggressive in that sense. And then you do have to think about how the roads get on top of that, because some of that is going to be
infrastructure within that.
infrastructure